Hey, peacemakers. It's Dawn Stone. I'm so happy to be here for this live on Freedom Friday. I am doing lives at lunch just to bring you the content from my client books to my YouTube page. And the reason why I'm doing this because I realize so many of us are asking questions around proper communication, proper relationship building, and how do we get confidence that we need to have these sometimes difficult conversations? So, today I'm going to share with you effective communication. So, allow me to share some things with you. And I'm happy you're here. So, I want to ask you, have you had difficulty, maybe possibly having a conversation with someone lately? If so, I want to help walk you through a way to have the conversations that you want at your ideal pace and in your unique style. So, a lot of times, what happens is people get into communication and they really have nowhere else to go. So, before I get started, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Dawn Stone. I'm the CEO of The Conflict Chick LLC. I am a speaker, consultant, and coach that specializes in conflict resolution. I speak and work globally to help people make meaningful, supportive, and courageous spaces, one conversation at a time. I work with organizations and individuals who are really interested in building their confidence, building their competencies, and really helping them communicate more effectively. So today's 12 lesson is effective verbal communication. And I'm just going to walk you through what it looks like and talk you through some examples for my clients. So when we think about barriers of communication in our community, what are some things that we need? What are some things that we face? And why is it often difficult? Whew, in conflict, what happens? Conflict is neutral. It's neither positive or negative. It is actually neutral. It is only positive or negative based on your response to the stimuli. So let me break down what that means. When you're in conflict with someone or have a disagreement, what's the first thing you notice? Typically, you notice you might get a little warm, your tight lips may purse just a bit, your blood pressure may go up, you may also feel a rush of energy and anxiety through your body. This is your body's natural reaction to what we call negative conflict. And I'm going to talk to you about how and why these things exist. Because I want you to remember, neuroscience tells us that our body is designed to protect itself. So when you're in conflict, what do most people do? Right? Flight, fright, freeze. So I'm either going to run away from it, I'm going to stop in my tracks because I can't deal with it and avoid it altogether, or I'm going to get purely combative and begin to lip box with you. So let's talk about where that comes from. It's this thing called barriers to conflict. So, what are some barriers? Sometimes we don't know what people want from us, and therefore we have unknown motivators. An unknown motivator in conflict could be I pop into your office and I'm like, hey, can we talk? And I'm ready to go to lunch. That's an unknown motivator. Like, why are you coming to me? You know it's almost 12 o'clock. Dawn, why are you even doing this video and this live at 12 o'clock? Because I want to catch people on their lunch break. Because I want to be able to have a conversation with people as they're riding to the next spot. Right? I want to be able to capture people so they can make it through the second half of their day. So the barrier is the unknown motivator. So what I just did is gave you my motivation for why I do these on Fridays at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. So now you know my motivation. And what generally happens is once you know someone's intent, you tend to release the control, release the wall, and it comes down just a bit. All right. Oh, Dawn's here to educate. Great. Another barrier in conflict is this thing called time. Each of us culturally and each of us as individuals, part of our DNA is we have our own internal clocks. And guess what? No one knows that clock unless you tell them, and no one matches that clock because yours is yours and theirs is theirs. So what does that look at in meetings? In meetings, it's people showing up to your meeting late because they've overcommitted and put in 6 hours of Zoom calls and forget that your meeting is one-on-one, face-to-face, right? So they say, oh my goodness, I ran out of time. I'm so sorry. That creates conflict. Another example of a time barrier is in a relationship. Maybe you have a spouse that constantly forgets all those special days for you, right? They can barely remember your birthday, so you always give them hints. Or maybe you like to cook breakfast and they're always late and running out, and you'd like them to have coffee and a Danish with you. All right. So time is another type of conflict that we have that creates barriers in our community that prevents us from being the best version of ourselves and from getting things done. The third option I want to talk to you about is what we call adversarial communication. All right. So that's basically a friend or foe. Sometimes in our relationships, we have people that just may have a different personality. They also may just have different things about them that they just don't like. Maybe they don't like to have face-to-face meetings. They're natural introverted people who enjoy just sending an email or sitting on a Zoom and keeping their face off. Adversarial communication could be the tact and tone that someone uses that isn't culturally appropriate with you. When we're operating in a global environment, we have to understand that there are 29 different ways that each and every one of us is different when it comes to diversity. It's not just what's on the paperwork or the employee in the employee handbook. It is the unique things about us, my upbringing, my age, my race, my marital status, my gender identity, my gender expression, my religion, my ideologies, my neuro difference. You see? So all of these things in union can cause adversarial communication. And watch this, without you even realizing it. I'll give you an example. I'm a very detail-oriented person when it comes to my work. But personally, I love just being spontaneous. So in my work life, if I ever turn on the spontaneous side of me, people are like, wait a minute, they came out of nowhere because they're not used to it. And for them, that could be something that's seen as adversarial. Why are you not giving me an agenda? Why did you decide not to come to my meeting? Why did you decide to drop off this project? Right? Adversarial communication, a lot of that communication comes in different forms. 75% of your communication is nonverbal. So sometimes even in this Zoom world or this webinar world, it's difficult for people to know really what you're communicating. We have email, we have face-to-face, we have smoke signals. Sometimes we're saying smoke signals just by that's a smoke signal right there for someone saying, oh, she's not interested or something's wrong. So adversarial communication sometimes comes when people are a little frustrated because they maybe have information or don't have information, need information or don't need information, sick and tired because they have a 2-year-old at the house or they really had a bad breakup with the partner. Adversarial communication comes in many modalities, so we have to be aware of all the modalities and be willing to have a transparent conversation about what works for you and asking the other parties, hey, how can we make this better? I really don't like Zooms. Here's an example. I really don't like to have 6 hours of Zooms because they wear me out. And I would really like to have a break. So is it okay if I come to the Zoom or we schedule this Zoom meeting in 30 minutes? See, that will prevent adversarial communication because if I'm going from Zoom to Zoom, I'm literally going to log in and be like this. Okay, what? Ugh, I'm so tired. Can I, so you understand. Now, another barrier to communication is this thing called lack of information, knowledge, and experience. We literally have 4.5 generations in the workplace today, from Gen Z, and we still have some veterans out there that are working. So the ones that are actively in the workspace and your peers and bosses are Gen Z, Millennial, X Gen, Boomers, and veterans. So with this, there are a lot of different idiosyncrasies that exist. They all like and prefer different things. And then no monolith is in one group. So you will run across a Gen Xer who has some boomer ways and some zillennial ways. It may show up in meetings like a millennial. How do we balance it all? Really understanding. I'm going to share some things with you that, man, I tell you, my clients pay thousands of dollars to get this information I'm sharing with you today for free. But I want to do this because my goal is to reach 1 million people with conflict resolution and really help us all do our own work to build the communities we all deserve to be a part of. It's a birthright. So when we lack information or lack knowledge or lack experience, that could come in many different forms and flavors. So sometimes we have a new person in a job and we expect them to know everything and they know nothing. So we may be a little frustrated and conflicted because I've been doing this for 10 years and I really don't have time to help Sarah figure this out. And so I'm going to train her, but it's going to be trained by fire, right? Meaning I'm going to put you in here and I'm not going to give you any documents. I'm just going to look at you and say, no, yes, click, right, let me do this. That creates more conflict than you know. And that comes from a lack of information on both sides. Experience, some of us have experience beyond our years. And so when I want to think about experience in this way, experience is things we know and things we feel. So your emotional intelligence plays a part in the experience game. Your IQ, your intellectual property, also contributes to the experience game. And guess what? Sometimes people are upset because you may know more than they expect you to know. That's the way conflict works. And when we communicate things, we might communicate at a PhD level and be the age of a high schooler, right? It's crazy how well versed we are, but it's such a blessing. And I want to encourage you to find a way to learn, unlearn, and relearn the things you need to be the best you. The last barrier I want to talk about before I move into the right column is lack of preparation. We have conflict sometimes. We may show up to a meeting and we're not prepared. We may show up to a meeting and not have an agenda as the lead in that room. What happens? Conflict. So for me, my personality type, I am a high driver, very driven, don't need anyone to drive my bus. I have my own gasoline. I don't need anyone to give me anything because when I walk into a room, I am already internally motivated to do whatever's in that room. Everyone is not like that. And so even if I'm not prepared, I will appear as though I am because I will find work to do. So think about the people who show up and they're like, okay, I really need an agenda. Like I can't put together this toy box without the directions. So you think about conflict, not having directions or being prepared for other parties is going to be problematic. Think about that relationship you're in. Your partner may not be the best at fixing things. So you as the partner who is not good at fixing things or the person expecting things to be fixed by your partner who can't fix things, you two have to come up with a different plan so you can reduce the conflict and really enjoy the joy of each other. In meetings at work, lack of preparation comes when we have a report or a presentation and the team didn't do their part. So I just really want to encourage you to look at conflict in a neutral spot, meaning how can I make my experiences better? Can I tell people my motivations or try to figure out the motivations of others? Can I show up on time or ask to be the timekeeper to help people stay on course? Can I check myself because my biases, my attitude and behaviors, my belief system all impact the way I communicate. So sometimes knowing myself and how I show up may offend other people. So then you have the ability to change course because you know how you're being perceived by looking and observing others. Can I have or obtain information, knowledge, and experience in ways that it is mutualist? That means I share, they share, it's fluid. We're learning and growing together. And then can I commit to always being prepared or at least attempting to be prepared in personal and professional circles? That would be great. If you could do those things, your stress level, your conflict level, your willingness and ability to manage conflict is going to be exceptional. So, here are a couple others on the other side I want to talk to you before I move into ways to get that conflict under control. I'm going to walk you through the conflict waterfall in just a second. But think about this. Lack of process is also tied to lack of preparation, which also gets into all these other motivations that you see over here. Time. BATNA and WATNA is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement and the worst alternative to a negotiated agreement. What I mean by that, excuse me, if you're in conflict with someone, you know who's going to solve that? Not the person you want on your side. It's going to be you and that other party. And the way to do that is to open those lines of communication and talk about what it is you want, need, ask them what it is they want, need, and then between the two of you, you'll come up with the best alternative to your own negotiated agreement. I call it the PINs. PIN. What is my position? What is their position? What are their interests and intentions? What are my interests and intentions? And then last, what do I need to get this resolved? And what do they need to get this resolved? So mind your pins. That's how you get to your BATNA. So you think about the best thing that can happen and the worst thing that can happen. Best thing that can happen in most situations is you get everything you want. Worst thing could be you get some of what you want or they walk away and you get nothing. You see, it's really, really cool to really, really enjoy and lean into conflict the way that it was intended. It's neutral. It's not scary. It's not that monster in the closet or that fur bunny and the dust bunny in the corner. Personality differences also impact our ability to communicate. Again, that goes into that adversarial communication. It could be a time thing, it could be a culture thing. Just understanding who we are. How do we find out? Spend more time with other people. Don't just show up and expect everybody to know you and your ways. It's about us, not you, the you and this. Lack of trust. In order to build trust, it comes down to relationships. And I'm going to share with you this waterfall that's going to help you build the best relationship you possibly can. Abuse of authority. Sometimes people have, remember the pen? Sometimes people have a position, and that's a power position. And their assumption is that they have reverent authority, right? Meaning what they say goes. Absolutely not. And I love this in organizations that I work with. I go at every level from the CEO all the way down to the person taking out the trash. And what I will tell them is, hey, you have the same rights and you have the same voice. And so your voice and your influence and your power is right there. And we allow them to voice the things that they need so there is no abuse of authority. And the thing is, if you build your culture right or you build that relationship right, there will be no abuse of authority because that person will intentionally want to make sure that they've addressed their own conflict internally and the conflict between the two. So it's all about conversations, but I'm gonna share that with you in a bit. Unfavorable environments. Sometimes having this in your hand is an unfavorable environment. If you're having a really serious conversation with your partner, do not do it on the phone, do it face to face. Remove the barriers, those are called distractions. The television is also an unfavorable environment when we're having a really in-depth conversation about something that needs to change, either between us or the work we're sharing. Unfavorable environments is sometimes the workplace itself. So when I had my team, before I went back out on my own, I would purposely have our conversations outside of our business. because I wanted them to feel open. I wanted us to have a new place and space, and I didn't want it to be all about work and stuffy and stiff and restricted. So we got really out of our box by leaving our business and going to other places, and we always ate. Now, cultural competency is a muscle that you must feed yourself. Depending on where you are in the world, where you're watching this video, it's going to differ. So I just want to encourage you to lean into that discomfort and watch YouTube videos. Continue watching videos with me. Like, subscribe, follow. I literally enjoy jumping from continent to continent, working with people and organizations to help them work through this. Because no matter what language you speak, no matter what country you're in, no matter what religion or unreligion or non-religion that you practice, there's conflict everywhere. And you do have what I call human conflict. So it's important to understand culturally we are different. And another thing, we have differences within a culture. So understand that there is no one flavor in any any community. All right. And then last, barriers of conflict in community is really about money and risk. Being upset with people costs you money, time, energy, and it increases your risk. Risk of loss of relationship, loss of self, loss of projects. So we really want to manage it. So let's jump right into it, okay? So when you are faced with conflict, this is the waterfall for conflict. And so what you are to do is ask questions. That is the secret sauce in managing conflict and making it neutral. So I want you to think about it as a scale, right? Positive conflict comes with more questions. Negative consequences and conflict comes with no questions at all. So here's a way to ask these questions. If you notice, we take the pyramid and we flip it on its head. All right. So listening is the biggest thing you should do. So 80% of the time you should be listening. And what are we listening for? Clues. Things are telling you, things are not telling you. You're listening to their pen. What is their position? What is their problem? What are their interests? What are their intentions? What are their needs? What things are they willing to negotiate? What are their non-negotiables? You see how the pens work? And then the S is, what systems are they using to communicate? So always stay on pens. And that helps you. Because what you will do is ask these open-ended questions, and eventually you will get down to a choice that the two of you will make. And that's how we get to the BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, by having these conversations, these very intentional talks. And I will tell you all, this takes time. You can be in this pyramid for years. Understand. You can be here for years. My very first client as a mediator was a 2-year conversation. You heard me. Same company. It was a government contract. GSA, to be exact. 2 years. And we walked through this. We did not get down to choice until near the end of 2 whole years. Literally. Okay? Like 22 months. So, here are the questions of some of the things I want you to consider. And I've given you some of the highlights, but I want you to write down your own questions that you would ask. And think about these questions. What are the questions you need to ask at work? What are the questions you need to ask at home? I'm listening and I'm taking notes. Help me to understand why we're here. Very good question when you're opening someone's conflict. Okay, it's a box. It's Pandora's box now. And sometimes what comes out of that box may not be for you, nor targeted, but it can be useful in helping you get down to that choice. So you listen with intent. Can you explain what happened on such and such day? And pause and start writing. All right? You want to begin with those broad questions. And then you're going to move into what I call analysis questions. So once we hear the whole tea, then we're going to slowly blow it off and begin to sip it together. So questions like, help me to understand. Can you explain what was the decision? See, that's the analysis level. And then in the analysis level, sometimes people, once they start talking, let me tell you what happens. They begin to de-escalate themselves because they're getting it out. True story. Try it. You can try with your kids. You can't try with the fur nieces and children, but definitely does help with the adults and the children in your life and in your job. What are you afraid of? What would be the risk of? Okay, so let me give you an example of that. I had a student and a teacher in conflict, and I say, "What are you afraid of?" Right? And so that student was basically afraid of failing the course, and so like, "Well, I'm just afraid I won't be able to pass that last exam. I'm just gonna drop." And so then I went back up to why would you want to drop? Okay, so remember, going back to listening. Even if it gets off kilter a little bit, you can always go back to asking a broad question and bringing them back through the waterfall. Okay. What are you afraid of? What's the risk of you staying in the class and finishing the course? What are your current grades? What does your financial situation look like? These are all questions I asked that student because the student was really was kind of risk averse. First year college student, wasn't sure that they were going to make it through college, period. And by the time we got through her entire waterfall, she was afraid of failure and afraid of success. And she happened to be a student in my class, but she was doing well in my class. So this issue was with another teacher. That student got through this waterfall. That student is a two-time entrepreneur and a two-time author. Published author. That student is a professional dancer. That student is a coach, a mentor, and an influencer. So, guess what? Asking these questions and helping her walk through her own conflict a few years ago when she was an undergrad made all the difference in her now. And so she's taken it. She has a very healthy relationship with her soon-to-be fiance. She has a very healthy relationship with her family. She's the first in her family to graduate from college, and she is now the example not only for other young kids in her community, but for her sister, who had been watching her the whole time. So we were able to help her balance the uncertainty because she was just afraid. She had a risk. She was a student athlete. So she was like, wow, this one class is going to crush me. But what we found is really tied to something else as a young person that she had experienced and just some fears that she was not willing to overcome until that moment. So fear, when it shows up in conflict, is false evidence appearing real. So when you ask these questions, guess what? You can get down to the bottom of why they're feeling this way and ask them to make an intentional choice to do something different. So that's also how we learn, unlearn, and relearn things as well. So in the choice section, then you'll say, do I understand that you fear failing or dropping out of school? Do I understand? So you're reaffirming what you've heard and what you think. And what that does is that helps you hear their needs, their pins, their position, their problem, their interests, their intentions, and allow them to negotiate the best alternative for them. And that's what that student did. And that student is amazing. And you know what? She now inspires other people up and older than her as well as younger than her. That's how you handle conflict. And she's been using this because once you get the skill and the tools down, you can share with other people. So if you need to review this and go through it and pause it and go through these questions and practice in the mirror, do it. That's how I became a decent mediator. I had to practice. Not only did I practice With my clients, I practice with my family. I taught my own children these tools. Even the 6-year-old knows how to walk through the waterfall. Okay. Yeah, I said it. And sometimes he catches me and be like, Mom, you're not listening. Mom, you're, wait, stop. And he'll take me back to the listen zone. Why did you say such and such, Mom? Why did you do this? Why did you choose that? He is 6 years old and an autistic 6-year-old at that. So I tell you what, you can teach. You can teach this and you can learn. So let's talk about communication and what happens in our own brain. Okay, we're going to bring neuroscience in here because I love it. It's social psychology. It's human behavior, human development. It's business. It's all the good things. So what happens in communication? We get communication in different channels. So remember me telling you about the different modalities and the ways that communication comes to us? Just know that you get flooded with hundreds of thousands of messages each day just by opening your eyes, opening your ears. Even if you have an ability that is not there, you still are being inundated with messages every single day. All your sensories, sight, sound, feeling. And if you're without one of those, so say for instance someone who is hard of hearing, deaf, and or hard of hearing, what happens? They still have multiple channels of communication that come at them. And so what will happen is it'll be different and it'll be something that they can do. And so it's real important for you to understand that in multi-channel communication, people have feelings. People's values show up and their opinions show up. And you know what happens? It's not intentional. Your brain does it. Your brain is designed to keep you safe. So in your working memory, which is like the big part of your brain, most of the time it's going, what can I use? What can I get rid of? Oh, this looks familiar. Let me pull it over here into a long-term memory. Let me pull it over here into an action. So you've got all of these synapses going off in your brain, processing all the things in your environment, all at the same time. But what happens is your brain will still choose the path most traveled by you. So if you're a person who loves to talk, what are you going to do? Your main modality is going to be what? Boop, 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 boop. So when you meet someone who does not have hearing as an option, what does that do? Immediately creates conflict because now they've got to figure out other ways to communicate with you, and you have to figure out other ways to communicate with them, right? Now, when we are in a place, in a space with someone at work or at home, and we feel really passionate about something, it could be a report, it could be a decision, it could be lunch. Do you realize, and especially in conflict, people value their feelings, their facts, and their opinions differently? Yes. So our channels are mixed all the time. So what happens? What do we believe more often? People will pass off their opinions as facts, right? I love to give an example of The Water Boy, right? What did The Water Boy tell us? This is a movie with Adam Sandler. What did he say? He was in Louisiana and he was very close to his mom. He got into college because he was very different. He had a difference. And so that difference brought him to a classroom with Colonel Sanders. You have to go see the YouTube or the vignette that they show. But he was asked in his biology class, why do alligators have so many teeth in their mouth? And he said it's because they were upset or honored because they had too many teeth in their mouth, instead of really having the answer of the size of their brain. Right? And so when you think about that, even in real life, people will believe fake news over the facts. We're in a culture now, especially with this technology, where sensationalism excites our brain. So when you have that working memory, ooh, that looks good and exciting. And so we'll sit on a opinion where someone's valued instead of an actual fact. So when we looked at Waterboy in that example, he really believed his mother because his mother never told him a lie, because that was his experience. So when you think about multi-channels of communication, when you're communicating with people, the fact of this sheet is this page here is to know that people come to you and their opinions and their values and their ideals are different. The way that they send you messages is going to be different. So it's up to you to figure out this fact, is an opinion, and what is a feeling. And that's why a lot of times you'll say, "Oh, don't don't bring your feelings into the workplace." But there is a place for feelings. It just has to have its relative position as it relates to the decisions that you make. Woo! I'm not taking you out of class. I'm not going to do that. Each person sees, hears through their own values, their own feelings, their own attitudes, their own abilities, and their reaction patterns. Some people grew up in houses. I'll give you a good example. My son is autistic, but he does not have sensory overload. His sensory overload does not require him to be in quiet spaces. His sensory overload comes when he has so much excitement around him, because sensory-wise, touch is what he loves. Touch and sight. And so when he's overstimulated that way, he is like a firecracker in a room, and he is so excited that in a classroom, it's hard to get him calmed down. So then we have to decide what's the best medium for him. What's the best way to get him focused and also aligned where he can show up as his true self without distracting other people, including teachers. So he sees and hears through his own lens. When he sees a lot of noise and action, he's like, "Hey, I want to be over there." I wonder where he gets it from. So just having awareness of the multi-channel model, and that people always feel sizing, eliminating, and adding value. So it's up to us to have an understanding around that, have empathy around ourselves and the people we are in communication with, and have consideration for others. So the best way for you to figure out what channel is being used, and if you are reading that message right, or reading the room, as some will say, ask those intentional questions. Going back to that waterfall. So let me tell you what active listening looks like. When we're in that listening mode, because that's 80% of what I'm asking you to do today to improve your ability to communicate effectively, you're going to use I statements. Generalizations are part of that fake news space. If I generalize everything I thought, that is tied to a value or an opinion that I have and not a fact that we should be working with. So I feel, I observed, I think. Don't ever say we unless that person is beside you and I've already said the two of us are, in hoots, and we believe what we believe together. Because that will look like what? Gaslighting. I said it. That will look like what? An imbalance of power. And I've already gone over what those drivers of conflict are. So keep those in mind. In fact, make a little cheat sheet. That's what I do. And I have it. So I know I'm like, I'm saying this. Ooh, I'm saying that. And it makes it a lot easier. So I want you to use the ladder of active listening. And so the ladder is like this. Look the speaker in the eye. That's the first step in listening. Ask questions. I showed you the waterfall. Use the waterfall. Make a list of questions. And then as questions come up, ask. Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions for clarity? Don't interrupt once they start answering. Because when you do that, that means you have shifted that seesaw into the negative conflict zone. Because if I'm only listening to combat what you're saying, that's official lip boxing. And we don't want to give out tickets for that. So don't interrupt the messenger. Don't change the subject. Sometimes conflict gets really heated. But what I can tell you it works is to say, thank you for letting me know how you feel. I appreciate that. Have you considered, and you can go into a question. What are some things? How can we make this better? What are some things you'd like from this conversation? See, don't change the subject. Stay right in there, because what you find when you connect to that conflict and you unpack it the way that I've shown you here, you get to uncover creativity, innovation, and you've empowered yourself and the other person to lean into the strength of the message, whatever that message may be. Extend the conversation. Sometimes it might need a little more air, might need a little more time. You just say, hey, I appreciate it. Thank you for bringing this to me. Is there an opportunity for us to maybe get together for lunch, or can I call you later after this meeting and we can discuss it more? Extend the conversation, because the more questions and the more exchange in communication, the better off you and the other party is going to be, because you're learning and leaning into the information and the discomfort. And then here's active listening. Respond verbally and non-verbally. As you affirm or hear something or understand something, give them a non-verbal clue as well as a verbal one. That is what it looks like. Hopefully, I've shared something today that will help you be the best version of yourself going forward. Hopefully, I've shared something today that will help you reimagine what conflict looks like for you. Hopefully, I've shared something today that you can use to become a better version of yourself. I am Dawn Stone, also known as the Conflict Chick. I thank you for being here. Those of you who are live, you are dope. Those of you who are watching the replay, you are dope. So you are determined, optimistic, positive, and encouraging. And I just thank you for being who you are. Have an amazing day. We'll see you next Friday, 12 o'clock Central.